reading for the sermon this morning is taken from Gospel according to Matthew. This is chapter 17, verse 14. When they came to the crowd, someone came and knelt before Jesus and said, "Lord, have mercy on my son, for he has epilepsy and he suffers terribly. He often falls into the fire and often into the water. And I brought him to your disciples, but they could not cure him." Jesus answered, "You faithless and perverse generation, how much longer must I be with you? How much longer must I put up with you? Bring the child here to me." And Jesus rebuked the demon, and the demon came out of the child, who was cured instantly. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, "Why could we not cast it out?" And Jesus said to them, "Because of your little faith. For truly I tell you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you." This is a passage that has troubled me for a long time, because it's sort of the one moment where Jesus seems to express his frustration, where he goes, "How much longer must I put up with you?" And a lot of times when we hear certain passages, certainly when I was a student, there was a instantaneous jumping to some type of a conclusion, and then we'd contemplate it, and there would be a way to experience what Jesus said that had a whole different energy to it. But to be honest with you, this one I've never been able to make that adjustment. I really think Jesus was frustrated. At the end of the passage, he talks about that is because of the lack of faith that the disciples were not able to perform the miracle to cast out the spirit that was troubling this being. The essence of the passage is about faith. And also, it's about the moving of mountains. And it seems that they're connected. Now, the one thing that's really important to recognize is, what are we trying to do here on the earth? I think of three disasters maybe of the last decade or so, maybe even longer. I don't know how long it's been. I remember there was Hurricane Katrina. There was a huge tsunami in Indonesia around 2005, and then the earthquakes in Haiti. And what happens to a lot of people when they hear about these things is they feel compelled to go to those places because they know that those places need help. Houses are ruined, people are trapped, they need medical attention, there's a need. I don't think people are going there expecting that it's going to be a joyful and blissful trip. So why would they go? I believe because there is something inside the human being that would like to alleviate the suffering of others. That is really what the path is about. I mean, I'll often say the path is about this or that, but really I want you to today the message is, the path is about cleaning yourself up so that you can be on this planet as a source of relief for those who are suffering. So is that going to be a joyful and blissful day? Strangely, there is some joy and bliss in being so selfless that you know that you're alleviating the suffering of other people. Now, oftentimes you'll hear, people will flood to these places and there'll be a news broadcast saying, no more people come. It's not helpful. Why is it not helpful? Well, strangely, when you try to help people, they're often not receptive. So with the best intentions, people are resistant to the help. They're angry, they're frustrated, they want the help in a certain way. And a lot of times what that help in their mind is just, well, validate that I'm a complete victim and give me money and just give me energy. And this is something that you'll experience. I mean, yeah, when we're having an earthquake or a tsunami and stuff, and people are just so displaced and they've lost loved ones and their houses destroyed, I mean, they may feel, okay, well, I'm glad you came, I understand, but they're not able to move into that mindset of like receiving. Now, what I experience when Jesus says, how much longer must I be with you? How much longer must I put up with you? I will tell you honestly that this is a big struggle for me. Because we strive to move into this inner space of love that God has given us. That is our right. To know the self, to know love. And then we're in the middle of these catastrophes. We're in the middle of people's minds who are chaotically consumed with victimhood and anger, and people who do not attend to details, and it feels like you have to manage not only your own life, but so many other people's lives in order to try to keep things moving. And that is very exhausting. And it is irritating because it's against love. So when people do things or say things that are against love, a soul who is in love with love will feel a sort of irritation. And I really believe that's what Jesus was feeling in that moment. That it revealed in that moment, like, I mean, what do I have to do here, kind of energy. I think it's easy that I think that it's interesting that it made it into the gospel, because it really is this one line where Jesus seems to express emotionally. But I take comfort in it because that is the experience at times. Now let's talk about faith, and let's talk about moving the mountains. One could read this passage and go, oh, if I just had that faith, everything is possible to me. With many of the passages in the Bible, there's no sense of time. It's almost as though if I just have that faith, everything will fall into place right now. And you have spiritual teachers, I'm going to put teachers in quotes, because for me a spiritual teacher is somebody who's gone through a long process, but people who are teaching spiritual stuff that have this kind of attitude, and their teaching is like, in an instant everything could transform. And you know, you're perfect exactly as you are. You're exactly where you need to be. I didn't take comfort in that kind of teaching because something in me went like, well, I don't know if I'm really exactly perfect right now. And how come I can muster up all this faith, I can't move the mountain? Because the reality is, it's not an instantaneous process. Over the last 6 months, you guys watched the transformation of this house. And there were many days over the last 6 months where I could barely get out of bed because it was so tedious. You know, to walk into this room, it's under construction, and just go, oh, man, I get this step and that step, and look around and go, I don't really know what I'm doing, I shouldn't be doing this. What if what if I'm spending too much money? And it was frustrating. But I walk around now and it's like, wow, I really like this place. It feels representative of the kind of place I want to live in. And it's not about going, man, I'm so amazing. It's about going step by step, the mountain is moved. Now, there's still things you guys know, there's still things I want to change, but you know, a big chunk of it is done, and I'm not really focusing on doing much right now. I got to get other stuff done. And for me, that was a mountain. You know, bought the house, I was excited about the location, all that. But you know, when I started to live here in the first few weeks, I'm like, man, wow, the carpets are all frayed, and the door handles are, you know, they're not working properly, and the light fixtures are cheap, and you know, it's just the baseboards are all cracked and dirty. It's like when you start to be there, you go, wow, this place really needs a lot of love. So we have to ask ourselves, what do we have faith in? Last week we talked about the atheist and the atheist mentality. And I'm very much okay with somebody choosing to be an atheist, because if that's how they want to live, that's okay. What do they have faith in? Well, they don't have faith in things not yet seen, because that's the essence of spiritual faith. Faith in God is when you believe in things that you have not yet seen. It's really not possible to live without faith in something, because we all realize the rest of the day is unknown, tomorrow is unknown. People could fire you, you could fire you from your job, you could walk out and get hit by a car, you could wake up and realize, oh my God, I have cancer. Things can happen that will throw you into an unbalanced state. To have faith in God is a very freeing thing. Because it really is, we know it's a waste of energy to be consumed with the fears of tomorrow. As opposed to, it's going to be good. You just make that your mantra. It's going to be good. Yeah, am I going to have to, at times, do things that other people should have done? I find that to be the case. Are people going to not rise to the occasion at the level that I think they can? I think that's true. Am I not going to rise to the occasion of what other people want? I think that's true also. Could we sit there and debate, who's rising and who's falling? Jesus calls it a perverse and faithless generation. It's painful. It's painful to be on the planet and know that love between human beings is the answer. And yet, what people are doing to each other is just heartbreaking. And perverse, too. The meanness and the cruelty. And then, you have the whole pornography stuff, which just gets more and more extreme as people become more and more conditioned to need something more and more, crazy. So, how are we going to grow? Because that's what we want to do. We want to grow into our true self. I think that process doesn't end. I've been surprised at some of the plateaus that I have experienced as far as frustration. And how does one then overcome that and reach this place of acceptance that the more you grow and the greater your spiritual sight, and the more that you examine everything and the more your wounds get healed, you really become just in tune with reality. So it's not so much that you have to examine after a while. You don't have to examine everything for the root of it and go, oh, this is a dysfunction in me. It's like, well, actually, the planet is operating from tremendous dysfunction and fear, which leads to perversity, faithlessness, a lack of understanding that the way to move mountains is by faith and then learning and then doing. And we do that as a population in some areas. We build up cities, we build up technology. In other areas, we do the opposite. We pollute the oceans, we pollute the environment. We abuse our children, we neglect our children. We take advantage of people. So in some areas, we don't actually move the mountain because we don't have faith. If you had faith, you'd realize that the karmic system is always correcting. So if you do something perverse and hurtful, it has to come back to you. Have faith in that, because if you do something good, it has to come back to you also. You would think that that system would be, within a short period of time, that would just be so self-correcting. That people are like, oh yes, when I put out this kind of energy, it comes back, and I don't want that, so I make the association. But there's nobody forcing me to do that. Well, then there's that period where you are putting out goodness, and you are striving to know the kingdom within, and yet it seems like the frustrations and the irritations are even more pronounced. That's because your sight has expanded, and you see the degree to which people are afraid, people are angry, people are selfish, people are forgetful, people are consumed with themselves and their emotional lives, their physical lives. So then that forces you to grow in love, to become more accepting, to become more patient, to become more giving. And guess what happens? Your sight expands, and you feel it even more. To such a granular level. You may ask yourself, why am I doing this then? The only line that I've ever found in the scripture that answers that question is when Jesus says, "Is it not what you ought to do?" And I mean, it kills me. It's just so painful. Yes, that is what we ought to do. We ought to be beings of love. There's no reason to explore, well, why should I do it? It's what you should do because you're created to do that. How do we communicate that to people? How do we inspire them to want that? That is God's hand. That is not our hand. There is nothing that you can do except be an example of love and be so convicted in it that people have to go, what is his trip? Why is he? There must be something in what she says and what she's doing because she's got some kind of a conviction in this. You know, that can move the mountain. Because people will notice that. It's the same thing with enthusiasm. You know, the entheos, meaning when you're in God, people can't help but going like, what's going on with that person? Now they can get sarcastic and cutting and weird, but it does affect them. Our community is small, but that will change. That's my prayer. People will come. I just want to encourage you to stay with it. It is what you ought to do. It is what I ought to do. And that's really the only answer that I think makes sense. It's what we're supposed to be doing. So when the world seems to just be so heavy and so filled with the fear and so irritating because of how far from love it is, know that I get it. I think Jesus gets it too. And yet, when the disciples came to him privately, he did not admonish them. He tried to teach them. So perhaps, he had a moment where he was like, and then he was regrouped. That gives me some comfort to know that.